Hi there, Namaste, Kamcho. Welcome to the Recruitment Curry Show from the very Apanu, Ahmedabad, India. Today we're going to be talking about one of the most important topics in every business, which is retaining talent. And this specific topic is about retaining talent across borders. Why I talk about this? Because after 20 years of experience working in the outsourcing industry, this is one of the most important subjects, at least in the recent times now, when people are working remotely and businesses across the globe have embraced remote working and outsourcing being one of the major drivers of expansions. So let's get the ball rolling. So before we start, let me just share the presentation to you here so that we've got points covered. Yeah. Right. Retaining talent across borders. Discover proven strategies for offshore RPO. Well, before I start, there's one specific point, which every CEO and MD, outsourcing or, expanding offshore should cover. And the question they should sort of, ask themselves and convey to the teams is, what messaging should the MD lead with, when executing an offshore RPO project? And that answer is, we are one team. Now, that's the messaging you want to start with, irrespective of if you're a recruiting agency or any other business in other sector expanding or recruiting talent overseas. So in today's show, what we will cover, 3 factors to consider when working with talent across borders, whether you're working with an offshore RPO or establishing your own team, elsewhere. 10 reasons why offshore talent looks for pastures green. Some reasons are very different than, obviously, the onshore talent leaving, jobs. And lastly, the CARE framework. So let's get started. So what are the 3 factors to consider, when you're thinking about executing an offshore RPO strategy or, setting up a team offshore? Well, the number one you want to understand is culture. The cultural difference, of your country and the country you're establishing your offshore team in. Number 2 is the importance of language. Well, of course, they'll speak English, but every language, every country has a different first language, and obviously it's not English. So it has a massive emphasis on, how people think, how people conduct and react. And 2, because, obviously it's talent across borders, your distance plays a major role. You don't have someone said, across the table. You can communicate, like you do on an average day. So culture, language, and distance are 3 major factors to consider when developing an offshore team. Okay, so let's understand, what are the reasons, offshore team members look for pastures green? Well, first and foremost, it's the lack of clarity. When companies decide to, set up an offshore team or even outsource with a third party, they generally, most of the times, they think, okay, fine, these are 2 tasks I want someone, said 5,000 miles away to work on. And if I just tell them, they'll do it. What you want to have is, full clarity. And then one of the major reasons, for people to try it is lack of clarity, lack of expectation settings and engagement from the client. So, obviously that is a second major reason for people leaving. You don't know, if you don't know, what do you expect your offshore team to work on? They have no clue on how to deliver. And obviously that leads to, how are we going to evaluate? And then, if you don't have these things, there's going to be, knee-jerk reactions. And which is one of the reasons, people don't want to work for companies and clients who are not process-oriented. Again, changing goalposts. One of the major reasons again, people will outsource, starting with, let's say, you're a recruitment company and you hire someone to work on a 180 model, and you have them just do the basic CV formatting or processing or admin tasks. Well, if someone has worked as a recruiter all their lives and you changing the goalpost to basic admin activities they're not going to enjoy, and then they look for pastures green. Micromanagement. Well, you can set KPIs, you can set, all the processes in place, but if you're going to try and monitor every minute of their activity, people are not going to like it, and that's one of the reasons for people to leave. No rewards and recognition. Now, who wouldn't expect to be rewarded in a business scenario, or recognized, for the work that they've done? Now, there are instances where companies forget that they've got people working offshore, and which is precisely the reason that, okay, fine, when the staff don't see recognition coming from their clients, they lose interest. Unreasonable expectations and lack of support. Again, so having no expectations and setting up expectations, KPIs, but you want to make sure that they are reasonable. You have a history of someone delivering on those numbers, and support. They play a major role. But again, there are companies who will want the offshore team to deliver on unreasonable KPIs. One of the major reasons for people to try it as well. Lack of appreciation, constant criticism. Well, this is a big one, because when the MDs and the CEOs decide to outsource, and they hand the reins to someone on their teams, the teams are going to they have a day job, and a lot of times it's the offshore teams, the talent across borders, that gets bashed left, right, and center. And then when they see no appreciation, and then constant criticism every morning, every afternoon, every evening, on emails, calls, nobody would want to work for a client like that, or in an environment like that. It's close to toxic. Not being heard by the onshore teams, clients. Now, remember the messaging. It's one team. Now, when you're working with offshore talent, you want to lend them a ear. You want to understand from their perspective in terms of what's working, what's not working, why it's not working, what support do they need from you. And then if they don't see these things happening, it's another reason for them to obviously look for pastures green. Lack of growth, it's universal. And of course, better prospects. People want to grow in their lives, people want to earn more money, more commissions, and then they're looking for obviously linear growth, lateral growth, and obviously vertical growth as well. So they move on for better prospects. So these are 10 reasons why people are tried. And then if you're the MD or CEO, or even a senior leader in a business considering outsourcing, you can use these points as and then sort of build a mitigation plan or an enablement plan to retain talent across borders. So let's talk about culture. We discussed 3 points, that it's culture, it's distance, and it's language. So why culture plays a major role in retaining talent? Well, firstly, as you'd already know, that culture shapes beliefs, values, and norms, and obviously has a major influence on how people behave, how people make decisions. You want to understand, at least have a slight idea about the culture of the country you're going to be working with, the people out there. Culture also has impact on the communication styles, including the language and the tone, and then again the non-verbal cues as well. So that's another thing that you want to sort of educate yourself about the region you're going to be outsourcing to, or setting up your office in. It affects how people view time, punctuality, work-life balance, and then leisure activities as well. Well, culture has a major influence towards the authority and hierarchy, as well as how people in terms of individualism and and collectivism as well. So when you are speaking to people across in Southeast Asian regions as well, so a lot of people are still accustomed to using addressing people from the West and Europe as sir, and then that's one thing which comes out in the interviews, and then we educate the candidates that, okay, fine, if you're going for the interviews, you can address people on the first name basis, especially when it comes to working with the clients in the UK and the US. Cultural differences, again, so remote workers come from different cultures, different language, and it must be sensitive to these differences. Talking about the language, Well, understanding the language. Now, you want to be as precise and as clear as possible with your offshore teams, when communicating, and especially if this is your first time and it's a part of your education, to your teams, that let's talk in, simple English language, if when you're outsourcing, so that you avoid any miscommunication. Tone, you want to be careful about the tone. A tone which is sort of obvious and simple and straightforward to someone on shore might be offensive to someone offshore, and then vice versa. So, as much as language and culture are important for a recruiting business, from the UK or the US deciding to outsource, it's the same for an offshore RPO business, or people here to understand that, okay, fine, how people communicate, from different regions. So tone is another important aspect as well. Feedback. Now, providing feedback to remote workers, requires careful consideration. We've had, and then, in my 2 decades of working in outsourcing, we've had instances where we've had to educate the clients that, okay, fine, yes, you want to give strict feedback, you want to give straightforward feedback, but you'll have to sort of package it accordingly, depending on the tenure of the person who's working with you. Make sure that they understand, how you react in certain situations, and then there's a profile that you build along with the, offshore person as well. You don't want to be so direct that, people start not liking you or not working with you. So package the feedback accordingly to make sure that, you are conveying what you want to convey, but it's not offensive. And then again, culture and language clubbed with distance. You have to know that, you are working with someone who is 5,000 miles away. They're not set across the table with you. So distance plays a major role. Emails, obviously, are one of the major reasons for misinterpretation as well. So, obviously, with now Teams, with now Zoom into picture, having a face to the name really helps. So communicate as much as possible on video calls, and phones with people, and then discuss, because there's more clarity against emails, unless, obviously, you're so busy, and and then people know that, okay, fine, this is what you expect out of them. So let's talk about the care framework, in terms of how the care framework will help you, retain talent across borders, irrespective wherever it is, because this is standard for offshoring, outsourcing, or having your teams wherever you have. Because obviously we are working with people, and we're talking about retaining talent, we're talking about retaining people, and then the roles both the parties play. So C stands for clarity. And then when you are establishing a team offshore, you want to make sure that you are clear about the objectives of setting up a team offshore. What do you want to do? Is your objective to increase efficiencies, fill more jobs, increase your operating profits, or is it just reducing costs? Do you want your offshore team to sort of just source more candidates, work in the 180 model? So you have to be really sure about what is your major objective, or what are your 3 major objectives of setting up a team offshore. Expectations. So once you're clear about the objectives, you want to make sure that you have all the tasks outlined in detail before executing your offshore RPO strategy. And that document is as simple as a scope of work document or a job description that you devise when you hire someone onshore in your offices, wherever, across the UK or the US or wherever you are. And then those expectations are key, because once people are clear that what's expected out of them, they're certain about delivering on those tasks as well. And then there's certain certainty of them sticking with your business. And then because that's going to generate confidence that, yes, my client knows what is expected out of me, instead of constantly changing goalposts. You're not sure, you start in week 1 and you'd say, okay, this is not what I want them to do, let's start with this, and then you again change. You don't want to confuse people and yourself. KPIs. So once you've got the job spec or the scope of work document in place, you want to make sure that you are aware about the KPIs you want your offshore teams to deliver. Because the more clarity they have, the more confidence they'll have in working for your business. It's very similar to you recruiting someone onshore, treating people onshore, and that's exactly what you must replicate to make sure that your retention rates on your project offshore are as high as possible. Dependencies. Now, not many companies, obviously talk about these things, but when you are, setting up the KPIs, you want to also review that. Okay, fine. What is this team member going to need to deliver those KPIs? And then that is something you can name it as enablement or dependencies. So, for example, your team offshore, one critical thing that they need to be in a position to deliver quality services is feedback. Now, how are you going to structure feedback? Is it daily? Is it once a week? What's the frequency? Who's the point of contact? So that's one dependency, and then the major dependency when you're working remote with offshore teams is communication. And in the same way, obviously, depending on the tasks they are working on, the KPIs that you have, you make sure that they are enabled with all the tools, all the resources for them to deliver on those KPIs. And these points are major drivers for people to stick with your business, to stick with your project, and then you can retain them for a longer term. Attention. A for attention. Well, for the success of your offshore initiative, or your remote office, just spending a lot of cash is not going to cut out. You will have to make sure that you devote and dedicate enough time for your teams offshore. And you cannot replace that resource. So if you're busy, you can assign it to someone else who's going to expedite it, who is the champion and who wants the offshore initiative to work, who wants the offshore teams to be retained as long as possible. And then they have to have that positive mindset that, yes, I'm going to make it work. So reviews and performance management. And then, that's going to take your time, because in the first 12 weeks, when you're setting up your offshore team, you are going to have to invest time in freezing on the KPIs, reviewing the dependencies, the training, reviewing performance, ironing out teething concerns. And that's going to take a lot of your time. And that shows that you are interested in making this work, which directly connects to the retention of the team members offshore. Feedback, like I covered in the previous slide, is very important. One is how frequently you give the feedback. Two is how are you conveying the feedback. You don't want to be so transactional that you're just conveying the feedback on the emails. You want to discuss the feedback either over the phone, or the best case is on a video call, because having a face to the name, let people see how you feel. Obviously, if you're happy with the performances, you want to see them that, okay, fine, they're adding value to your business. You're really happy with the performances. And yes, they'd have a better reason to, continue working with you. And if you want to give, let's say, constructive feedback, you can do that on a video call as well. You want to see those emotions both ways, so that, you build a more cohesive approach of working together, and then, build the emotional equity, as I emphasize to a number of our clients, that what you want to build across, borders is emotional equity with your teams, so that they feel like they belong to your business, they work in your business, they work for your business, and they are part of your business. And then the more emotional equity you drive, across the teams, the better for your business to retain your offshore team members. Let's talk about R. Stands for rewards and recognition. Well, everyone wants to be recognized. Everyone wants validation. So make sure that you appreciate and recognize your offshore team members regularly. Simple things that if they've helped you achieve a certain deadline, either on time or before time, you send an appreciation email, or even a quick phone call that, well done. It means a lot to people working across borders, because they don't see you, you don't see them. For you, it's one task less, but for them, when you call them and when you appreciate what they've done, it brings a smile on their face, and then they feel valued. So all across, you want to make sure that you want your offshore team members to feel valued. Have that one thing on your mind always when working with people remotely, that am I making them feel valued? And that's one of the reasons, for people to continue working with you. Of course, a major reason why people work, in recruitment and sales and business is to make commission. So, if there are sales roles, if there are delivery roles, or, even if there are basic admin roles, at times, you want to make sure that there's some kind of commission structure in place to make sure you retain talent, across borders, because they're helping you achieve more. They're helping you, fill more jobs in recruiting. They're helping you, obviously source more candidates, find more candidates which your team is not able to find, or place more candidates, drive further your operating profits. So at the end of the day, they're helping you, achieve not only your bottom line, but also generate intrinsic value for your business by scaling it offshore with the flexibility. You want to make sure that there's a better reward system in place for the people to earn as much money as possible. You want to help them live a better life, and then have a lifestyle, which is what a number of businesses that we work with, across the UK and the US invest into. That, yes, I want my teams to have a better lifestyle. What is the best commission plan, Ketan, you would suggest for us to have? And then, I'm writing a ebook on this, so obviously I'll sort of post it when it's ready. So if anyone of you wants it, you can DM me, and I'll share it with you in terms of what kind of commission structures you can have to reward your team, and what kind of recognition programs you can have. So one of the things our one of our recent clients did was they developed the exchange program along with us. So we call it OCAP, on-site knowledge enhancement program. And the team of 4, they delivered hundreds of thousands of pounds in additional margins to our clients in the accountancy and finance sector. They invited 4 of them to work from their offices on the exchange program for 2 weeks. It was more of a training opportunity on site. The 4 team members learned a lot about how the business operates. The teams there, they got a chance to engage with their remote teams. Now that the team is back here, they're motivated. It works as a massive retention tool. And that's one thing you really want to make sure that you have on your, in your budget, if you're thinking about recruiting talent offshore, as a strategic step. So I'll share the ebook when it's ready in the next couple of weeks, and then you can have a look at it. Engage and educate. So, you want to make sure that you don't miss a single opportunity when it comes to engaging with talent offshore. Take advantage of every possible, opportunity, and then, so be it appreciation, be it talking to them to discuss the job specifications, be it, anything and everything. You want to make sure that you're communicating it with them over emails, Teams, or whatever, source you use, phone calls, Zoom calls, video calls on an average week. Engage. The more you engage with your teams offshore, the more they see you, the more emotional equity you're building with the teams. That really helps a lot in retention of the offshore teams. You don't want to be a client or a business who's going to see the team once in a month. Oh, they're based in India or Philippines or wherever they are. I don't need to spend time with them. All I need to do is, just look at the bottom line. That strategy never works. It will work for a short time, but at the end of the day, you'll see things crumbling, and then, people will leave for pastures green. People want to see you. When you go into your offices on shore, do you just ignore people and walk into your cabin, or do you at least, obviously wish them, they come and say hello? So it's precisely the same process. It's just that, it's remote. You can make a phone call. You can, so basically, engage as much as possible with your offshore team members. Have a process in place, a typical engagement process, which sort of is built as per your timelines. So, communication and engagement level will drive retention. It's a proven process. Training and development. So, education is important. You want to make sure that your offshore team members are learning new skills. They're upskilling themselves. They're helping you do more. And then, at the end of the day, people want to grow in their roles. So if you have a strategy to grow your, offshore team, wherever it is, you have a roadmap for your offshore team members. They can start at a trainee level or resourcer. They move up to senior resourcer or associate recruiter, move into a proper recruiter role, 360, whatever your structure is. it is possible to upskill people offshore. You can have the same level of trainings online, on exchange programs, and still scale your team, still retain your team members by making sure that you're engaging and educating them at all the times. So to summarize, it's care. So, obviously you want to make sure that you have 100% clarity before you're actually establishing an offshore team. You want to make sure that you have enough time to dedicate, and then that is where the attention span is. Deciding to offshore, spending the cash, and okay, let's give it a go for 3 months. That process is very short-sighted. You will have to allocate time to make sure that your offshore initiative is a success. And then I'm emphasizing this much more because at senior levels, obviously people will decide that they'll hand it over to somebody else on the teams. The teams have their day jobs, and they'll say, oh fine, I've got somebody working offshore, can you do this? They'll spend 5 minutes in the morning, and that's about it. And then never see them for rest of the week. And that's when the things obviously start to crumble. So you want to make sure that you budget in not only the cash but also time to make your offshore RPO strategy a success. Rewards and recognition are have a very healthy and a very attractive commission plan in place, along with any recognition structures that you have. So some of our clients have early Friday offs because they have their onshore teams leaving early on Fridays. They have mental health holidays. So any benefits that you see that are really working onshore really well, you want to pass them on to the offshore team in terms of recognition, in terms of the rewards. Of course, obviously there's going to be a difference in the percentage in terms of the costs and stuff. So align it accordingly. And then I'll cover this on my ebook, and then you'll get to have a look that okay fine, how can you devise the comp structure, the recognition structure for your talent across borders, and especially for the recruiting industry. E for engagement. Engage, engage, engage. That should be your mantra when you're working with offshore teams. The more you engage, the more emotional equity you're building. So it's EEE, engage, emotional equity. That's all you want to make sure that you have on your mind at all the times. And that's one messaging you want to pass across all your teams. So again, going back to the second slide, where as a CEO, as an MD, as a senior leader in the business, you want to drive that message that we are one team, onshore or offshore, it doesn't matter. At the end of the day, we are working together to achieve one set objective, and whatever that objective is, to be number one in your industry, or to increase your operating profits by X percentage, or to increase your fill rates by Y percentage. You want to make sure that you drive further their objective across the teams, get them on the same page, and you start executing your offshore strategy. It works wonders. You've got numerous case studies when companies have followed the cash structure. They really look after the team. The retention rates are high. And then you want to make sure that, okay, fine, your retention rates, if not more, they're at least about 80 to 85% to drive your offshore strategy. That's the bare minimum that you want. You don't want to have a very high staff turnover right at the beginning of your outsourcing initiative. You should never have that. And again, go back to the slide where, obviously I was talking about what are the top reasons for the offshore team members to look for pastures green. A majority of those things are, in your control when you're offshore. Clarity, rewards and recognition, engagement, support. So everything that you would have when you recruit somebody onshore is exactly what you must replicate, depending on, how your retention rates are onshore, to offshore as well. So treat your offshore team members as you treat your onshore teams. No difference. You exactly want the same treatment, assuming it's good and it's positive. You want to create a lively environment where a number of people offshore, want to work for your business, and it becomes a magnet. So what you want to have is a really attractive work culture on your offshore teams. You can share goodies, you can share stories, you can share vouchers, depending on everything that you do onshore. But treat your offshore team members exactly as you treat your onshore teams. So if you want to learn more about developing your offshore RPO teams, how to retain your offshore RPO teams, and obviously, rewards recognition, anything with regards to developing talent across borders, you can reach out to me on LinkedIn and we can have a chat. Thanks for being there. Cheers.